Good morning. My name is Chris, and I will be doing a reading from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus was at Bethany, a guest of Simon the leper. While he was eating dinner, a woman came up carrying a bottle of very expensive perfume. Opening the bottle, she poured it on Jesus' head. Some of the guests became furious among themselves. "That's criminal, a sheer waste. This perfume could have been sold for well over a year's wages and handed out to the poor." They swelled up in anger, nearly bursting with indignation over her. But Jesus said, "Let her alone. Why are you giving her a hard time? She has just done something wonderfully significant for me. You will have the poor with you every day for the rest of your lives. Whenever you feel like it, you can do something for them. Not so with me. She did what she could when she could. She pre-anointed my body for burial. And you can be sure that wherever in the whole world the message is preached, what she just did is going to be talked about admiringly."
God be with you. So my name is Nick. I am one of the ministers here. Chris, thank you for doing that. And as we get into the sermon, let's start with this. Let's start with a story about how once, maybe a long time ago, maybe last week, it doesn't really matter. I don't know why I'm starting the story this way. It doesn't matter at all. But once, there was a contest to see who could build the biggest sheep pen. And the idea was that people would sign up, they'd be given the same amount of materials, the same amount of wood, the same nails, the same tools, and whoever built the biggest pen would win. And 3 people entered the contest. There was a mathematician, an engineer, and a farmer. And they were given 1 day to build a thing. And so they go build their thing, and the judges show up, and they start judging with the mathematician. And she had used her amazing skills of geometry to maximize the tools and materials that she had to build a pen where 100 sheep could fit into. And the judges were like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay." And next they go over to the engineer. And because it's an engineer, they figured out that if they split the wood in half, it was actually sturdy enough to double the size of materials they have, and their pen could fit 200 sheep. And again, the judges were like, "Whoa, that's good." And next they go to the farmer. And they're in disbelief as they show up to the farmer because the farmer had built a 1-foot square box. And as they show up, the farmer stepped into it. And they're like, "That's your sheep pen?" And the farmer said, No, you're in the sheep pen. I'm actually outside of it." And so what we're doing this Lent, this season that takes us into Easter, is we're looking at some of the stories of Jesus, and we're asking what they can teach us about how to live more fully and deeply. And the idea basically is that if he's our guy, if he models for us the way we're meant to live and move and have our being, if he shows us what it means to be human and alive in the world, if he's the one who saves us into this life that is deep and full, we can look at some of these stories and not just figure out what that life looks like, but more importantly, and here's the whole point of Lent, we can begin to look at that life and look at our life and look at that world and look at our world. And we can begin to see what is off. We can, sing one of these things is not like the other, and we can begin to see the work that we have to do. We can begin to see what healing, what help, what attention we need to give ourselves or our world. And we begin to change this and change that to become a bit more like the life and world that Jesus teaches us to have. And in church world, we call this the work of repentance, which I know has a scary ring to it, but all repentance really means is a change of heart. It's changing how we live and move and have our being. It's the transformation from one way of living, one way of being into another. In the story we're going to look at today, it should help us do exactly that, because this one has got some wisdom that we need to hear. I know I need to hear this wisdom all the time. And I think it's something that can not only change how we hold and tell our own stories, but it's going to be something that can change how we view our pasts, maybe how we view our presents, but certainly change how we view our future, and through it all, take us into life as it's meant to be, this life that we're all here looking to create. And so today, we are going to talk about the number 67,282. We're going to talk about that thing Richard Rohr said, and then we're going to spend a lot of time talking about garbage. Are you with me? Does that sound like a good Sunday morning to you? Okay. And so the story that we got today, the one that Chris read, all kinds of things we could talk about, all kinds of gold in here. Like there's that opening line that begins with Jesus as eating supper at Simon the leper's house. All kinds of things we could talk about with that. There's the fact that a woman is the main character of the story. We could talk about that. We could talk about how there's this message in here that helps us exist in this broken and unjust world. So many things we could talk about, but we're not going to talk about any of that. We'll save that for a different day. But today I want to talk about this. Why were the men so upset? Why were they indignant or furious? What is the tension of the story? So I don't want you to yell it out. Just take a minute and go back to the story that you heard. What made them freak out? And I'll give you a hint. It's not the perfume. And I'm splitting hairs here, but the nuance is going to be really important later on. Because the problem is not that this woman went and bought a really pricey bottle of perfume, and then the men looked at the receipts and freaked out, being like, "You spent how much on this?" Because it was a lot. This is one of those stories that's in every single gospel in the Bible, and each one tells a story more or less the same. In every single story, it says that that bottle of perfume cost about 300 pieces of silver or a year's salary. Just let that sink in. You know how much you make. This bottle of perfume cost that. Or to put a number on it so we can all work with it, the average Canadian income for a year, $67,282. This is a story about a woman at a dinner party who took a bottle of perfume that cost $67,282 and poured it all over Jesus' head, all over his feet, all over the floor, emptying out all $67,282 worth of perfume. And that is not the problem. As wild as that is not why those men freaked out. And to see why they freaked out, we don't actually have to look too hard. In what might be another miracle we never talk about, they actually say why they're upset. They point it out. They looked at what was going on. They looked at what that woman was doing, and what they say? They go, "Think of all we could have done with that money. What a waste." They called it a waste. The problem here is not that she spent the money. The problem here is how they saw it. The problem here is that they saw what she was doing as a waste. A waste of an opportunity, a waste of resources, a waste of something valuable, a wasted chance to do some real sustainable, lasting good. That's the problem here. And let's just check in with each other. They kind of got a point, right? Like, it's really hard to blame them. If you had to choose a side, you're kind of going to be like, I'm going to go over here with these guys. I mean, $67,280, that's a lot of money. Like, they could have bought something cheaper. Like, can you see Jesus caring that it's not Chanel? Like, sorry guys, it's not Chanel. No, I'm not going to put it on my body. Like, he wouldn't care. And she could have used like a handful of it or a drop. Again, Jesus is not going to, get upset with that. It's the action, it's the symbolism, it's the meaning of it that matters. The gesture would have been the same, but she dumps it all out. Of course, it's a waste. And as I picture this going down, I can kind of see the guys like getting upset, and they're looking to Jesus. They're so confident. Like, they just know that Jesus is going to back them up. Like, they know that he's going to say something about how much food, how much support, how much housing, how many initiatives $67,000 could start. They know Jesus is going to say, like, we could actually do something that's sustainable. We can make a real difference in people's lives, a significant impact on the world with all of that money, instead of it just being something that just like ends up seeping into the earth and is gone. Like, this would be the very thing that if he's going to object to anything, it's going to be this, right? Of course he's going to object. It's hard not to see it that way. And they're there watching Jesus, waiting for him to like be like, well done, boys. Well done. You are right. Sorry, woman. You're wrong. Like, they're just waiting for that affirmation. And when Jesus does finally say something, what's he say? He says, leave her alone. Stop, shh, stop. When Jesus does finally speak, he dismisses their concerns. He literally shushes them. And why? Why does Jesus dismiss their concerns? Why does he say, stop, quiet, shh. Because he doesn't see it the same way they do. He does not see it the same way they do. And we're going to pull over here and spend a lot of time here because this is huge. This is really big, not just to help us understand the story, but this is really big for our own growth, our own journey as spiritual beings trying to tap into that life that is deep and full. There's some sacred wisdom here. And that wisdom is this: the work of faith, the whole arc of spiritual formation, the very point behind why we do stuff like this, it is not about becoming smarter. It is not about becoming better. It is not about becoming righter. But rather, the whole arc of spiritual formation, the whole point of it, is about learning how to see. Spirituality is about learning how to see. Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan monk and a spiritual teacher, he would put it like this. He would say, Christian spirituality is learning to see things for how they truly are. Christian spirituality in general, is about learning how to see things for how they truly are. It is about learning to see beyond what is literally right in front of us, beyond the physical, beyond the construct, behind the binaries and paradoxes, the biases, the feelings, and the circumstances, and trying to see what truly is and what truly matters. That is what spirituality is for. It's about learning how to see. And the work here that Jesus is trying to do is teach us how to see as he sees. To see with God's eyes, which is to say, not seeing with this or with this, but to see with this. To see is to see out of your heart. It is to live out of here. It's to see as the Spirit sees. And if you're familiar with a whole bunch of Bible stories, this is what Paul, in one of the letters he wrote in the Bible, is talking about when he prays, open up the eyes of my heart. Or if you hear those other stories about people having scales falling from their eyes, yeah, that's what's going on there. Or if you hear stories of hearts being softened, yeah, that's what's going on there too. This is what's happening when we see with compassion and empathy. This is what happens when we see our enemies as humans. When we see ourselves as loved and enough, we're seeing the way we're meant to see. We're seeing what is truly actually there. It's a way of seeing the universe differently. It's a way of seeing and understanding things with and through God's Spirit. Anyone know what we're talking about? You with me? Yeah. And the lesson we're getting here is about how we see things. Because the tension here, the problem here is there's a difference in perspective. The men see one thing, and Jesus and the woman, they see something different. They all see it as an act of waste, and they expect Jesus to see it that way too, but instead he completely shifts the conversation and points out a whole new way to see things that we think of as waste. What's going on in this story is a whole new way to think about the things that we think of as waste. And let's just make sure we're on the same page here. When we talk about waste, well, we are, but not really. We're not talking about the things that we literally put in the trash and that we literally see as garbage, right? When we talk about waste, we're talking about all those times that we poured ourselves into something or someone, but we got left hurt and abandoned. We're talking about all those seasons in our life that were just a struggle and a hardship and full of pain and suffering, and we have nothing to show for it. We are talking about all your failures. We're talking about all your mistakes. We're talking about all your missed opportunities. We're talking about all your investments, these things that you pour time and money and love into, but they didn't turn out the way that you wanted them to. We're talking about all the things in our life that make us go, ugh, well, that was a waste. Ugh, wish I didn't do that. Oh, what a waste. Who knows what we're talking about? Yeah, you all do. Put your hands up. We all have those things. We all have said that. We've said that when a relationship ends and we look back on it and say like, oh, that was 20 years of my life. For what? Now I'm left with nothing. What a waste. We say that when we go out of our way to do something really kind and nice, but it goes unappreciated or not noticed, and we're left being like, well, that was a waste of time. We say that when we try to create something, but it doesn't work out, and it's just a flop. Oh, that was a waste. And we say that after years and years of trying to heal and grow, but not really feeling any different. And we think, oh, what a waste. What a waste of time, what a waste of energy, what a waste of money. So much waste, right? Yeah, we've all got waste. And this is where Jesus does his thing. This is where he's going to save us. This is why our spirituality matters. Because this is where Jesus comes in, and to everything that we have called waste, to all the expensive perfumes that we've watched dumped out on the ground and just vanish into the earth, to all the things that we've said, oh, what a waste. This is what Jesus says. A waste? No, 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 no. I don't see it that way at all. Here, let me show you what this truly is and why that truly matters. And this is where he lets us in on a little secret that is baked into our faith and spirituality. There's no such thing as waste. There is no such thing as waste. Nothing ever needs to be seen as waste. Because here's the thing. Here's the thing that Jesus knows. If we see everything as a transaction, if everything is quid pro quo, this for that, if we gauge everything on the return of our investment, if we only value the result, if we only value winning, if we only see success in the most narrowest and lamest of terms, of course we see things as waste. There's no other way to see that perfume on the floor but as waste. But, and here's the shift Jesus wants us to make. What would happen if we look beyond what's right in front of us and we see the intention and not just the action? What would happen if we value the process and not just the result? What would happen if we value the process more than the result? What if we actually see what's really right in front of us and not just what we're thinking it is? What if we saw the growth and not just the loss? What if we saw success in a much bigger cosmic way? What if you saw it with compassion and empathy? What if you saw it with gratitude? What if you saw it with love? Can you see the difference? Can you see what Jesus is trying to make us see? Yeah, and that shift, it changes everything, doesn't it? Suddenly the thing we saw as a loss and a write-off isn't a waste anymore. Suddenly that garbage is gold. Suddenly it's sacred. Suddenly you didn't lose, but you gained. Suddenly there's beauty in the letdown. And suddenly that thing that was bad, useless, and shameful becomes something good, beautiful, and holy. And suddenly, and here's the most beautiful thing, suddenly our stories change and we begin to tell them very, very differently. And when you learn to tell your story differently, everything changes. Everything will shift and life changes. Everything changes when you learn to hold and tell your story in a different way. What Jesus is trying to do here through this story is get us to realize that if resurrection happens, if redemption is real, if God is in the mess, if everything does belong, if grace is where it begins and where it ends, if all these things are true, then there's no such thing as waste. Waste can't be a thing because resurrection and redemption happen. We never need to see it as waste because there's goodness in there. There's growth in there. There's beauty in there. There's gratitude in there. Suddenly all the waste of our lives shifts and changes and becomes treasure because that becomes the place where we've learned, where we've grown, where we've lived, and where we've loved. And if life is about learning, living, growing, and loving, it's not a waste. Was it hard and difficult and awful? Sure, yeah. But not a waste. Not a waste. All it is things that just have not been redeemed yet. Just things we haven't found the value in yet. Which is so profound. And if you leave here with only this, you're good to go. Your waste is just stuff that hasn't been redeemed yet. You just haven't seen it in the right way yet. You haven't seen it for what it truly is yet. And so as we head into Lent and we do that work of changing how we live and move and have our being, our homework this week is changing how we see. And so the question for you this week is, what's your waste? What have you written off? What garbage are you carrying around with you? How can you see it differently? How can you redeem it? How can you find the lesson within it? And how can that garbage be transformed into something that is good? How can your stories change? How can it become you saying, I wish that never happened, but I am so grateful it did, because this is who I am now. This is where it got me, and this is how I've grown from it. Because the truth is, there's no such thing as waste. The problem is how you see it. And so as you head from this place, may you see it for what it truly is, and may that transform not only it, but you as well. And to that we say, Amen. So this time is for you, because this work is not easy. Changing how you see things, let alone doing the work of changing your garbage into gold, is tough. So you can sing along, you can journal, you can pray. There's some people in the back who would love to say a prayer for you. We also have some art back there that you can go and just look at and pray over. You can light a candle. But use this moment, use this opportunity, don't waste it, to step in and do that hard work of transformation. And may grace and peace be with you.